Hello and welcome to the Smart Connections podcast and the Talk the Path podcast. My name is Anna Sanderlin. I am a warm-line facilitator for the University of Memphis Smart Center. The University of Memphis School of Social Work Smart Research, Training, and Treatment Center aims to provide evidence-based interventions for school-based mental health programming, increase access for school-based behavioral health programming in underserved areas, offer training on best practices in telebehavioral health, develop opportunities to research the use of technology in practice, and provide direct services to the state's most vulnerable populations. You can call the Smart Center at 901-678-1636. The University of Memphis Smart Center, in conjunction with the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, and the Tennessee Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services, would like to present the Pathways to Behavioral Health Careers Project. The goals of the Pathways Project are to provide education and information on the various career opportunities in the field of behavioral health through presentations, increase interest in students in the field of behavioral health, provide opportunities for guidance with information regarding college, university programming that result in degrees for professions in the field of behavioral health, connect students with students in behavioral health programs and professionals in the field for further research. This podcast will feature students and professionals in the field to give a clear picture of the daily duties of these roles and how they help support their communities.
My name is Gracelyn Berg, or Grace, either one is fine. I am currently in my first year of my master's program for social work. I have an undergrad in psychology from the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, and my master's is also with the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, but specifically with the College of Social Work in Nashville. A little bit about me is I am originally from Seattle, Washington. My family's kind of like moved all around, but somehow we ended up in Georgia. So they're in Georgia, and I fell in love with UT's campus. So that's kind of how I ended up in Tennessee. Was I fell in love with the school, and through that, then I kind of found Nashville. And I've been in Nashville for about a year and a half now. My current position that I'm in here, which is why I moved to Nashville originally, was I actually am a mental health tech. And what that is basically just we ensure the safety and well-being of all patients in a inpatient psychiatric facility. And I just kind of make sure all the patients have everything they need, that their safety is being taken into consideration. We do groups with them that are more trauma-based groups. And yeah, I really enjoy my job. I specifically work with the adolescent population of the hospital. And the adolescent population is usually from like 12 to 17 years old.
Absolutely. Well, it sounds like you came from a far way away. I was born and raised here in Memphis, Tennessee, so I've been here in the South my whole life. So I understand, it's definitely a different type of vibe, maybe from the North, but we're very glad to have you guys down here. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and what led you to work in behavioral health?
So I have always been really involved with like children, whether that's been through like babysitting or nannying, and kind of through that love of like being with younger kids and like working with children, I kind of fell in love with the idea of just trying to be there for them and like help them in a supportive way. And originally I like really was interested in speech therapy. I found that through somebody that I had worked with at like a job in high school. And I really enjoyed that aspect. But while I was kind of going through that, I kind of realized that I was like, it's really important to like understand why a kid is stuttering. But
right.
I kind of really liked like, why is a kid stuttering? Why is a kid like voluntarily mute? Like, is it because of trauma? Is it because of something like that? And that kind of led and sparked my interest in behavioral health. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of fell in love with like the psychology department at UT. And through that, I really wanted to, after I graduated, I didn't really know a lot about the behavioral health field. I kind of knew like what a psychologist was. I kind of generally knew about like what a counselor was, and I knew I wanted to do therapy specifically with children. And so I was like, how do I start? Where do I go? And so that's kind of how I found the mental health tech, because when I graduated, there aren't like an enormous amount of jobs like just for your bachelor's in psychology in the mental health field. And so I chose that like mental health tech to kind of get my feet like wet a little bit into the career and see if it was something I was interested in. And so I really enjoyed like working with the kids, and kind of through that job, I discovered I was like, I really want to be able to do like one-on-one counseling or like provide support. And the best way that I found upon research was social work. And so that's kind of how I fell in love with social work, and that's kind of where we are.
That's awesome. Now, I know you said that your initial interest and what originally drew you to the behavioral health, aspect of things was that you wanted to work with children in speech therapy. Is that something that you are currently working on getting your specialization in?
No, I did it a little bit in college. That was my first like started undergrad, but like I said, like while we're going through the courses, like for speech therapy, the UT's program, they do a lot of more like electives.
Right.
So you can do like how their track is. And so you can I took the elective, and I was like, I want to look into the psychology route.
Right.
So speech therapy, and then like we would have to take some speech therapy classes, but they were more like, I don't know if this is my thing, like to learn how people swallow.
Right.
And all of that. But I think one thing I took from that program was speech therapists really work closely with like the deaf population. And so I think that was kind of a cool thing, and as well as like special education and stuff like that. So I think that kind of helped me, prepared me to be like, okay, I'm interested in like just being an advocate for communities.
Right. And honestly, that is the most important part, as anybody's role in the social work field as a social worker, is that first and foremost, we are advocates for our clients. So that's a wonderful place to start, especially when you realize like, this is what I want to do with my life. This is where I want to be. So I completely understand you on that part, because that is also how I got into the social work program here at the University of Memphis. Was I started out elsewhere, and it's like, I want to help people, I'm good at advocating for others, and now here I am, and I absolutely love it. All right, so great. Tell me about a typical day for you as a behavioral health worker.
A typical day really looks, so for my position, specifically like at the hospitals that I've worked at, we usually do like 12-hour shifts. So you get there usually at like 6:52, and then you leave around like 7:30 sometimes, depending on like shift change. And so usually like we start off with like passing reports. So like they'll do, depending on like which shift I work, I like will work between days and nights because of like school schedules. So like for day shifts, like I'll come in and I'll get night shifts kind of report. We kind of go through, we do like environmental safety rounds. So we just kind of check each of the patient's room to make sure that there's nothing in there that like would be a safety concern for them specifically, as far as like, self-harming behaviors or suicidality things, anything like that. We just want to make sure that everyone's safe and protected.
Right.
And so we kind of do that together. Then we like pass report. And then with the kids, with the adolescent department specifically, we have to be a little bit more structured, especially with this age group, because, teenagers and adolescents in general really thrive on structures. So we try to keep it structured as much as possible. And like what structured looks to us is we usually wake them up at the same time every day. And then we usually get their vitals. You have to get their vitals like twice a day, just to make sure that there's no like health concerns. We want to make sure the patients are like physically healthy. And so we get their vitals, and then we do breakfast, and they're really in groups from like 9 to I'd say like 3 o'clock. So during that time, like while they're kind of in groups, I'm just kind of doing checks on them to make sure everyone's safe and protected when they're in the groups, if they're participating, if anybody has like any needs specifically, like they'll ask me, for socks or water or something like that. I kind of like take care of their like physical needs. Also, if any kid is feeling like a little triggered or anxious, during like any of the groups or throughout the day, then it's kind of my responsibility to talk them through that, make sure that they're safe, that they feel safe. If they're having any suicidal thoughts or ideations or self-harm thoughts, trying to kind of help them work through those emotions and process them in a healthier way than like what they're used to. So choosing healthier coping skills. So I'll get like, we'll talk or we'll listen to music, we'll color, we'll like get some books. So something that's kind of usually like what my day shift usually looks like. And then, try to get them to have a little bit of leisure time. And I just really like hang out with the kids, which is really fun. Sometimes we'll like play Uno or we'll all like color together. Sometimes we'll do a puzzle. It just kind of depends on like the group dynamic at the time.
Right.
And then like the rest of the shift is kind of just like that, just kind of leisure until the night shift comes in. And night shift is kind of the same, except we try to get the kids to go to bed around like 9 p.m. They have usually the same bedtime. We usually wake them up and they go to bed around the same time, just to enforce that like structure so that they're, when they go back home, it's not like, oh my gosh, I'm having to wake up for school at like a really early time and I've been at this place and I could sleep like however long,
Right. No, I think that's awesome that you guys are not only helping them build healthy habits, but also helping them build healthy coping mechanisms, so that, during that process where they are leaving the hospital, they are being reintegrated back into their own home life. It's not so much of a transition, because those transitionary periods can be extremely hard, especially for adolescents who are currently going through puberty, just, all the hormones, all the things that goes on with being an adolescent and growing into adulthood. So I think that's really awesome that you guys are able to implement that in your practice. Let's see. How would you explain what behavioral health is to someone that is unfamiliar with the field?
Oh, this is such like a dynamic question.
Right.
I feel like behavioral health, like if I was speaking to somebody that didn't necessarily like understand what it was, I feel like it's really like, it's one of those things that is very like complicated and comes from more of an emotional and like mental realm. I always like to explain to the kids, like, if you go to the hospital and you like, it's physical, you break your arm, like you have to go, there's a process of like what you have to do when you go to the ER and all of that stuff. And people can like physically see it. They like know what to do. They put your arm in a splint and then they, make sure it's secured. After that, you're kind of, given maybe some medication to help the pain with the arm. You're put in a cast to make sure, you don't really like it's safe when you're like doing your normal like day things. And then you'll kind of go on as usual with having to have this cast. And then you might see the doctor a couple times to like check in to see how it's doing, if there's any pain or anything like that. And then like after you get it off, you might have to go, to physical therapy. And again, like when you get the cast off, to try and like make sure it's functioning back to the way that it's supposed to as your arm. And so that's kind of how I would describe, like, if you think of that scenario, but you think of it with your brain, like sometimes in our life, like we have stressors and sometimes things like just kind of crack unexpectedly or come up and we're just like, what is going on? And we have to go and like get help because something feels off in our brains or in our emotional states or well-being. And so we have to, get help, talk to somebody that have to kind of help us, bring us back to a baseline and, make sure our brains or our emotional states are safe, like we feel safe. our environment is safe, if that's the problem as well. And then, yeah, just kind of like after that, like going to check in if we do need medication for something. If something's a little bit harder at first, we can use medication. If we need, after, if we need some more therapy, then we can, get some more therapy. But it all comes back to like, we want us to feel better about ourselves and like walk out of the experience feeling better than what we came in as.
Right. No, absolutely. I think that is a wonderful way to explain it to other people by showing them that, hey, we have physical aspects about ourselves that sometimes we have to reach out for help. We have to go to the doctor. But we're also not just objects. We're not just things that can be broken and put back together. We're human, and we have thoughts and feelings and emotions. And sometimes we can't take care of those all by ourselves. So we also have to reach out to professionals, to doctors, mental health care professionals, behavioral health professionals to help us move through those stages of life. And definitely by comparing these two, we're also able to help lower that stigma around mental health, because there is still such a large amount of stigma around the topic. But it is changing. It is changing, which is a wonderful thing. What do you believe are the most common misconceptions about mental health and behavioral health?
I feel like a lot of times people like don't feel like it's like as big of a deal. They're like, I feel like a lot of times people are like, well, like it's just emotions. It's just like feelings. And so like it's not really that big of a deal. You just need to like, stop being like sensitive, I feel like is the word that a lot of people will use. And just like get over it, or like, just realize it's not that big of a deal, I feel like that's really a big one. I think also people think that like, if you're going through it, that you're never going to be fixed. Like if you have this thing just follows you around for the rest of your life and you're never going to be better, which is like really hindering to the patient to like be like, well, like what's the point if I'm never going to feel like happy again,
Right.
And so I think those two misconceptions about mental health and behavioral health are really harmful, because, we should tell patients like things can get better. It might not look the same, but like there's always a road to recovery, and like there's always a way that you can better yourself. And like everybody has feelings, has emotions. We're all human. We all go through this. Sometimes emotions are different for people, experience them and feel them in different ways, and people react to them in different ways. And so we shouldn't judge people or be like, you're too sensitive for if an emotion that we're feeling is new and we're a little overwhelmed with it. We should like support them and be like, I get it. Like, let's talk, or, go see a provider. And like the providers also should be enforcing that there is a road to recovery, and that if you do the things, the coping skills or whatever like works for you to help that emotion, that things will get better and you won't hopefully be feeling like this for like your whole life. And there is a road to recovery.
Absolutely. So I know we already kind of talked about the relationship between mental health and physical health, but how would you describe this relationship, and how would you say that one impacts the other?
I think there's always, I feel like in this field of psychology, it's always or like behavioral health, there's so many things that you're like learning. And like, I think a big thing in my classes and like through working is how much like our brain affects like our physical well-being, whether that is moods or just kind of how we see the world and our perception of it. And all of our like actions come from that control center. So if our behavioral health didn't connect to our physical health, then we would just kind of be walking around like zombies and not really knowing like what to do. Right. But because we have our brain and because we have emotions and feelings, we respond to those emotions and feelings, and like our actions follow. That's why some people, like if they have a feeling, like that's why we cry, and that's why we smile, that's why we get angry and mad. Like it's physical actions or responses to the emotions that we are feeling.
Right. No, absolutely. And I'm sure everybody can relate to they're going through a rough time mentally, and that bleeds into their personal life. So it could come out as I'm just having a really hard time getting out of bed this morning, or, I have 3 kids at home and I'm used to cleaning the house and making breakfast, making lunch, making dinner. And now all of a sudden I'm not able to do these very physical things that I normally do throughout my life. And most people don't always realize that there's a correlation between their mental health and their physical health. But it's not always bad. It can also be the other way. You know, a lot of people say they start going to the gym and it benefits their mental health because they're getting that dopamine rush. They're getting that extra energy out and it's helping them regulate themselves and their mental health as well.
Exactly. Yes. No, that's such a true statement. I always give the kids like this example whenever I like do this group. And I feel like people, just like what you're saying, like the brain is so powerful. Like there's this condition where your brain, you tell yourself you're like pregnant. I don't know the exact word, but you tell yourself pregnant and you're not actually, like you don't have a baby in there or anything like that. But your body responds to that thought and like you give physical signs that you are pregnant.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely. Kind of like a placebo effect.
Yes, placebo exactly. And I'm like, if the brain is that powerful to do that, like imagine like you could do it the other way. Imagine just telling yourself like how amazing you are like all the time with that thought. That to me, I'm like, that was like, okay, whoa, like our brain really affects our physical.
Right. And it just goes to show what we tell ourselves. They're not just words. They will absolutely have an effect on ourselves, on our physical health, on our mental health, how we portray ourselves in this world. So absolutely. So on to our next question. What therapeutic methods or frameworks do you typically use when working with clients?
I'd probably say we use more like with the clients I work with, it's a lot of trauma-informed approaches to them. We also I'd probably say we use systems theories too, like the idea that there's like multiple things that affect one person and it's not just coming from like the psychoeducation. But we also use a lot of dialectic or like dynamic, I think that's the word, but like a lot of different processes because like in a hospital setting, like you have so many different concentrations, like behavioral health concentrations or roles. Like you have the psychiatrist, you have like a psychologist, you have a social worker, you have a psych nurse, you have me, mental health tech, and all of these people like interact with the patients and they also all go to like a treatment team and like a meeting where they all talk about like the care plans of each patient. And so I feel like that kind of creates like a conversation from different trainings and different perspectives of the client or the mental health field or like whatever the client is going through. You're just getting so many different sides of it, which I think is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's always good to remember that people are dynamic. So there is not one size fits all. Something that might work for somebody is not going to work for your next client or for your next patient. So it's always good to just keep in mind that you have an entire toolbox of resources just at your disposal. And sometimes it is going to take some trial and error to find out which one works the best, which actually kind of leads us into our next question. How do you approach working with individuals who may be resistant to treatment or unsure about seeking help?
It's a really good question. I feel like with adolescents, this is like my life.
Right.
A lot of times the kids will come in and they're like, I don't need I'm fine. Like I don't need to be here. And you're like, okay, like very resistant. Like they don't want help. So it is a struggle. And like we were saying, each patient is different. I feel like I've come at that situation in so many different ways. With some patients, like I'll try and like ask them critically, whether that's like they're coming to the hospital, but a lot of times we'll have clients that are like, well, I just said something in a heated argument and like I'm here, but I didn't mean it. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so like, they don't think that they're like, well, that like, I don't actually like want to hurt myself or hurt other people. I just said that because I just was like upset. And I was like, okay, so they're a little bit resistant to the treatment and they're like, not really sure like why they have to go to these groups or like why they should even be here, why they can't be home. And I usually try and talk them through. I'm like, well, like, but you said those things for a reason,
Right.
I'm like, if you didn't feel that at all, like, then why did you, why was that a topic of conversation? And why did you feel like you needed to say that? Whether it was like you felt that or this situation brought that feeling up. Let's dive deeper into it. And that usually kind of, I feel like for some of the clients, like that'll kind of get them thinking and to be like, well, yeah, I guess I have been sad for the past, however many days. Like, my mom and I have been getting into a lot of arguments that have kind of been like irritating me, or like there's like another situation in school, and like, so there's usually always a reason. So usually when we kind of sit down and like think critically and talk about it, after we have that conversation, usually they're a little bit more like, okay, like I get it now.
Right.
And they're a little bit more willing to. Sometimes clients are just simply like, I don't want this. I don't need this. And sometimes you just got to give them like space to like feel those emotions and being like, okay, like that's okay if you don't want to do this. Like with in a psych hospital setting, like they do have to like be there like for documentation. Like they can't be discharged until a doctor like discharges them. So it's kind of like, I can't like get you out of here.
Right. But you can always kind of redirect that conversation and be like, okay, well, if you don't think this is the reason, well, let's talk about something else. Let's talk about, why we're here, what's going on. Do you have anything else you want to talk about? So I know that brings probably a lot of challenges. And probably one of the biggest challenges that you face at work, but what are some others that you face in your line of work?
For like adolescents specifically, I feel like a hard challenge is being able to like meet patients like where they're at. Sometimes I feel like it's hard, and like, and what I mean by that is like sometimes when you have kids going through hard times or in hard situations, or even like patients in general, sometimes it's hard. Or I've seen like people in my field to be able to like be like, why are they acting like this? You know what I mean? Like, I get they're sad, but like, why is that being shown in like these? Or like, why are they wanting to hurt themselves? Or like, why are they suicidal? Or things like that. And I just think the hardest challenge is like being able to like go in yourself and like have unconditional positive regard and empathy for like other people, and being like, I don't fully know what you're feeling and I don't understand it, but I like want to meet you where you're at and like have you explain to me what this feels like for you and why you're doing the things that you're doing and why you feel like this, and how we can change the narrative to like not have you initially like want to do these actions based off of the feelings, but like do something else, or like see how an amazing person that you are, how much potential you have.
Right. Absolutely. And I know, especially when you're working with clients in the mental health field, in the behavioral health field, it can be hard to differentiate their emotions, their experiences with your own, because you become so close with your clients, you work so closely with them, and this can lead to burnout. So do you deal with burnout or the emotional toll that this type of work can sometimes bring?
For my master's program, there was a lot. The first couple of weeks, this was like a very hot topic. Everybody in mental health is so good about being like, are you taking care of yourself? You're doing what you need to do. So it's a very like prominent conversation, which I really appreciated. And so for me, I talk to my friends. Like I have a really good support system, and I kind of just like vent to them about like the situations and how like things made me feel. If there's something like, I think that everybody in the mental health field, should either go through therapy themselves or like have a therapist. They even tell us this in school, just to like process the emotions and the emotional toll that sometimes working with these clients brings, and having somebody that like is also understanding of that but comes at it more from a clinical and like subjective view rather than like having just my friends or family. So I'll also talk to like my therapist about the situations, and I feel like that helps me kind of be like, okay, I vented about it, like I talked about it, I processed it, we're good. I also do a lot of like self-reflection, like journaling, just to like understand like what I'm feeling and put a name to it. And then I also just like try to like fill the rest of my days doing things that I'm not at work, doing things that like make me happy, like that bring me joy, whether that's, walking my dogs, doing self-care, like having a spa day for myself, if it's going to bring me joy, like, and like make me feel like good about myself in that moment, then like I want to do that, things like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So we're coming down to our last two questions. Do you have a story of a particularly impactful moment or success story from your career while maintaining confidentiality, of course?
Specifically, I can think of 2 or 3 that I felt like I saw them when they came in, and I saw them when they left, and I feel like I was like, okay, like I believe that they're in a much better place than like when they arrived here. Obviously, like in hospitals, like it's kind of like we can't really, unfortunately, like see their progression.
Right.
The only time that we could like really see a progression is unfortunately like if they came back, which happens a lot. And then it's kind of like a bittersweet moment because it's like, oh, like I'm glad to see you, but I'm kind of upset that like, or like sad that you're like back in the circumstance again. Like, let's process this. But I feel like some stories were just like a lot of kids will come in and this is like their first time in this hospital. You know, they're just experiencing like, you know, they had a really emotional situation going on and they attempted suicide or, you know, a very risky self-harm behavior. And so they kind of end up in the hospital and they're like scared because they're like, you know, I've never really talked about this. I don't really know what's going on. And seeing kind of how they come in and they're scared and they're a little like, I don't know what to do. And then seeing them leave as like a stronger individual that
Right.
is like, kind of like takes on of like, I am not broken. Like I am a human that has emotions. And through this experience, I have gained tools that are going to help me to not be able to be in this position again as much as possible and like get help when I need it and to do the things, the self-care things that I need to do in order to like keep myself regulated. And so that's really empowering. And like my success stories is when I feel like the kids leave and they seem so much lighter and like
Right.
well equipped than when they came in.
Absolutely. And I think it's also really important to note that sometimes impactful moments do not have to be this big, grand, you know, oh, they had an enlightenment and now, you know, they're complete. Like, it's not always like that. Sometimes it's just them coming in and having a safe space to talk, somebody that they feel comfortable with, somebody that is giving them that compassion that they needed to up until this point. And while you may not be able to see, you know, these big progressions, because like you said, sometimes the only times you see it is when they come back a few months later. But sometimes just hearing how they speak about themselves and how they speak about others and how that changes throughout their course of treatment up until the point when they leave and their confidence has majorly boosted. I think that's an incredibly impactful moment, even though that does seem a lot smaller. Something that is also not as easily seen. Those are also extremely impactful moments for these children, for adults too, for their healthcare providers. So for every person that is in their life and a part of their treatment process. But Grace, this is the last question I have for you today. So if you could give one piece of advice to someone struggling with their mental health, what would it be?
The biggest advice, I feel like, even in my own struggles with it, of just understanding that like you're not alone in your feelings and you're not like weird or like crazy for having emotions. Like you're a normal human being and situations are sometimes a lot, and how we respond to those is different for everybody, but everybody goes through it. Everybody has feelings of anxiety, sadness. Everybody feels these things. And so you're not weird if you're going through life and you're like, I'm feeling a little bit more anxious than normal. I'm feeling a little bit more sad than normal. And I'm feeling a little bit more upset than normal. And I like feel off. And it's okay to say that. And it's okay to know that that is perfectly normal to have those feelings, especially in adolescence or like when you're going through a stressful situation, and know that if you talk about it, people will probably more than likely be like, yeah, I've felt the same way or like been there. And it's a really good way to like build community and know that you're not alone going through these feelings. And if something's ever too much, find somebody that you feel like you can talk to about it, and surround yourself with like people that also like push you to be better, or like if you talk about something, like they're going to hear you, understand you, and also give you really good, impactful advice when walking through this situation. They're like, yeah, I felt this. This is what I did. This is what I had to go through, but I came out feeling better than normal. Let me meet you where you at, and like, let's walk through this together.
Right. Absolutely. I think that's a great piece of advice, especially just because with, hard times in mental health, isolation can become a really big thing. And it's extremely important for people to know you are not the only person who is feeling like this. You are not the only person who has gone through this. And there is a way out, and there is a way for you to be able to take these skills that you might learn from a therapist or a provider or a mental health professional and be able to implement those in your life. So always is getting that word out there and, kind of helping to end the stigma. But again, Grace, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today. I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation, and I hope that you have, a great rest of your year. Congratulations on getting into the master's program. Good luck with the rest of it.
Thank you.
And you guys, y'all have a good rest of your week. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank y'all. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for tuning in to listen to our podcast, brought to you by the Smart Connections podcast from the Smart Center at the University of Memphis, as well as the Pathways to Behavioral Health Careers Project. If you or anyone you know needs any information from the Smart Center, please contact us at 901-678-1636 or email us at smartcenter@memphis.edu. You can also learn more about us at our website, memphis.edu/smartcenter.